What are some red flags that made you leave the relationship? When we were just starting out, we ran into some unexpected financial difficulties. We had to borrow money from my parents to make rent 1 month. I was vocal about how much I hated doing it and how badly I wanted to pay them back as soon as possible. He took some of the money, bought an expensive bottle of high quality alcohol, and hid it from me. He was not working at the time. I hate people that have no shame in borrowing money. I have absolutely no issue loaning it to someone, but you shouldn't get comfortable. The bad news is that the money totally went to waste, because when I dumped him, I had to give up the apartment and move back in with my parents for a little while. Anyway, the good news is that I did pay them back a few months later. The better news is that a little while after that, a childhood friend confessed that she had always loved me but hadn't said anything because she thought I was happy with him. She and I just celebrated our 2-year wedding anniversary, when instead of apologizing after being caught lying, he met another girl on the internet to show me how easy it was to get another woman to talk to him if I wouldn't, but he still expected to work things out. A friend of mine sat me down one day and told me she'd been smoking pot with him. He was a dealer at the time, and telling him how bad she wanted him, basically begging him for intercourse. He turned her down every time, but admitted he wanted to be with her and didn't think I deserved to be cheated on. He made it clear he was interested, but also that he wouldn't come between us. So it was my decision how things went. She denied it, but I dumped her shortly afterward, and she started dating him maybe a week later. He was kind of a mean guy most of the time, but I've always appreciated him giving me the heads up instead of just letting her cheat and me be none the wiser. He ruined every big event. He had an attitude that didn't let you enjoy anything. He would act happy and excited leading up to said event, then just ruin it. I just left a relationship for this same reason. No matter what the situation, he always had to focus on the negatives and acted like the whole world was against him all the time. I have severe depression, and eventually, after a particularly bad relapse where I was suicidal again, I got therapy. I worked so hard to change my outlook on things, to practice self-care, to recognize when my symptoms were getting bad and manage them, and to have someone constantly trying to undo that was just too much. Controlling behavior. That I should wear covered clothes so men wouldn't look at me. It was a very hot summer and I already would wear long skirts to my ankles and tops without cleavage. One time we were eating at a cafe and some drunk dude who was sitting behind me started to talk to me. I didn't even turn to him or acknowledge him, just kept eating. My ex started to fight with him and then took me by my arm to leave. On our walk back home he was screaming at me how this was all my fault. After 3 years, that was my breaking point, and I left. When I moved for work and felt my mental health returning, I thought I was happier because I moved to a city I wanted to be in. But instead I discovered that each time she visited I wasn't happy about it. I had a pretty big breakdown after she broke up with me, but after that, the world seemed brighter, probably due to the lack of gaslighting. He was a little older than me and well known around the city, a DJ, and he loved taking me and my friends and coworkers out and entertaining us. It was a good time, and I'm the type of person that likes to include people in things they might not have a chance to do again. It was a blast. Then he started taking them out when I wasn't around and entertaining them at our place. He later referred to me as the greatest unintentional wingman he ever met in front of people I knew. Luckily at least one of my coworkers was a decent person and clued me in. Probably when I told him I needed them to come to couples therapy with me because I was tired of having the same arguments and I was miserable because of these issues we were having, and his response was to look me dead in the face and say I don't want to go because they'll just tell me I'm wrong and I don't want to have to change. Hit me then that he didn't actually care if I wasn't happy, just that he was hard to misinterpret when he literally said it to me. I had the same kind of thing happen. My ex mentioned that her therapist thought I could drop in for a session or two with her, and I thought that was great. This was within the last 2 months of our 2-year relationship. After some stuff went down and we were on the rocks, I told her I would love to do couples therapy, and she frowned and said, "Why? I don't want to go to couples therapy and just be told how bad I am." I realized I needed help and asked for it. Got diagnosed with depression. and recommended to stay in one clinic because I was really at the verge of suicide. I called her, explained the situation, and told about the clinic. Her response was, and I quote, "And what will I be doing while you are there?" I noticed she wasn't my partner that moment. My ex-husband would get moody when my plans would change or when I would come home early from a trip. I ignored it, but something wasn't right. Eventually he just started treating me like I was somehow in his way, still claiming he had been faithful. I left him. Many years later he admitted constant infidelity. It was not a shock. Sometimes you know. Even if you don't know, you know. I broke up with a woman pretty soon after she told me that she hated surprises and that I should never surprise her. We were in a long distance relationship at the time. That was pretty revealing. Also, in the 6 months I dated her, when she would tell me about her day and her life, she never, not once, interacted with a single heterosexual man according to her stories. It was always her gay friend or her married friend. I actually paid attention. Not once did she ever tell me she interacted with a single man. It was weird. She clearly was leaving that out, and I wondered why. I became sick to my stomach about it, and as soon as I broke up with her, it all went away. I knew then it was the right decision. I knew years later that it was the right thing to do, because I eventually became friends with her. One day she was in town and I called her phone because she couldn't find it. She picked it up, and I saw that the name of my contact was the gay friend she always was talking about. She would always claim she would drive to visit him in Vegas. It was like a 40-hour drive and she did it routinely. I knew then that she was so full of it didn't matter at that point, but it was the moment that solidified that I had dodged a bullet. Finding out I was unwittingly in a 3-way relationship as the emotional support component, second man to the first man's physical component, the hard way. With her it was lots of talk, cuddling, dates and playful light over the clothes touching, but never any further than that. I respected her boundaries enough to never question the issue. I just figured she needed a deeper connection first, and I'm cool with waiting however long my partner needs. Things continued on, and eventually, 6 months in, she slipped up and mentioned the man she told me was her ex was coming over after I left. She realized she slipped, and I caught it when I questioned her about it, and so confessed that he had been doing that regularly throughout our relationship. Oh, but not to worry, because it wasn't for anything emotional, mostly just getting drunk and having wild, primarily satisfying animal instinct intercourse. Being a big fan of both those things, I did not appreciate the deception, to say the least. She suddenly started an expensive new hobby, cyclocross, then got mad at me for showing up to her meet or race, or whatever it was to support her. She was not happy about having to introduce me to this whole new group of like 10 friends, her cyclocross team, that she was suddenly on, and had a uniform for and everything. Couple weeks later we break up. Immediately she moves out. I happened to be driving by her new place one morning. I didn't even know where it was, tbh, but we still lived in the same city, and I recognized her dog. Lo and behold, the guy with her out front first thing in the morning is wearing the silly cyclocross uniform. I suspect she had begun the relationship before breaking up with me, but didn't bother to confirm. The doctor calling me 2 weeks after I had my son to tell me that my son's father had given me chlamydia during my pregnancy. I had gotten a full test of everything at the end of my first trimester and was negative for any STIs. My labor lasted about 42 hours after my water broke, resulting in an emergency C-section. I'd been kept for an extra 2 to 3 days because I couldn't shake a fever from some kind of infection they weren't able to identify at the time. We stuck it out until our son was a bit less than a year, simply because we were just in the new parent routine together, until we got to a point where we could take care of ourselves as individuals. That phone call killed whatever romantic love I'd had for him. I went through the most traumatic experience of my life, pregnancy included, with the labor, because F 2/3 of the trimesters, and he couldn't respect our commitment to each other. I was dealing with emotions during that first year or so after my little guy was born. Doc, how many sexual partners have you had since 6 months previous me holding my newborn? 1. What is going on? Doc, you need to come in for meds and bring your partner, because if he is the only sexual contact you've had since your last test, he is infected as well, but he did not get it from you. She was incredibly specific about how chlamydia is transmitted to make sure that I did not listen to the lies she must have predicted he would say about how he got it. He tried every last one. She was actively pursuing another dude who she had a thing for a few years back because he had recently become single and she had a shot on the rebound, which is cool. You do you. Kinda predatory but okay w/e homie, but lying to my face and saying you ain't interested is a fatal flaw in communication. Even if it didn't pan out, that sort of behavior is almost never an isolated incident, so I'm like. At my college boyfriend's apartment, I was doing my calculus homework, and he was working on making a stand for a speaker. In the middle of a fairly tricky problem, he called from the other room asking me to hand him a wrench. I called back in a minute. The next thing I hear is the speaker stand being kicked toward me. I look up at him, and he says, "You're lucky it wasn't you." I was out of there. The feeling of if I don't appease this person right now, I might not live until tomorrow was a big red flag. There were lots of others like the attempts to cut me off from any support networks. I thankfully had enough to get me out once I'd accepted that I needed that help and that it was okay to accept the help getting out and that with help we were gonna make a plan. I woke up to 20 missed calls and like 50 message talk about how I was a bad person for not answering the phone and she knew I was cheating on her and that she was leaving me. I told her I was sleeping and she immediately called me crying and begging me to take her back and that she isn't normally like that. I was practically smacked in the face with a red flag. I kind of felt bad. She must have been in some really bad relationships to become that way. I don't think people turn out like that just because. He was incredibly insecure, jealous, and paranoid. He would get extremely angry at me for accidentally looking at another man, usually just zoning out when someone happened to be in front of me, claiming I was doing this to get their attention and or deliberately embarrass him. He would also continuously accuse me of talking to a whole bunch of different men that I never had, and more. Worst part in all of this was that the more I would try to reason with him and or even give him proof, the more he would distrust me and the more firmly he would believe these delusions. I really loved him, and I knew he was really struggling with his mental health, but he wouldn't get help. And the last time he tried to make accusations against me, I knew I couldn't let myself keep going through the emotional abuse. When we first started dating, I tried playfully flirting with her, and she told me she didn't like it, and told me because she has some traumas and she doesn't like flirting or inappropriate conversations. Found out later that she's been flirting with multiple guys behind my back, and they were very explicit. Asked her why, and she said she was afraid of looking like a slut to me, but somehow was comfortable looking like a slut to everyone else because they didn't matter to her. If they treat you differently when it's just you two vs when you're around other people, sure there are some small things we do around our partners, so we act a little different in private, but if it's a major switch in personality, leave the relationship as fast as you can. Curiosity might compel you to stay, and it's annoying to get hot and cold treatment. Just leave and don't bother. I met her twin sister one day. Her twin told me the one I was dating was the evil twin. Actually, they were both pretty evil. Haha, this was back in my college days. Apparently the girl I was dating got into our engineering program just to find a husband. She was smart, but and she didn't want to have to work for a living. So she wanted a guy who had high career earning potential, therefore engineers. To lock that in, according to her twin sister, her strategy was to try to get pregnant. She was going to do the old poking holes into condoms thing, or to simply ask the guy not to use condoms. We never engaged intimately, because I was trying to decide between her and another girl I was interested. I went with the other girl, and she and I were together for 3 years. But that other girl ended up cheating on me and hurting me hard. That's a story for another time. Oh, one thing to add to the twin sister story. These twins started a journal at age 7 on how to kill people. Seriously, stuff like hooking up a door knob to a light bulb socket. And I found out that the other twin sister, the one I wasn't interested in, was responsible for a lot of the methods file for how to commit suicide, which floated around on Usenet Net News for a while, circa 1991. If anyone remembers her, she went by the name Psycho Kitten. Both girls had great smiles and looked innocent enough. Just a warning for the rest of you guys out there. Haha.